Welcome to Tabletop Tommies. I'm Jonny.
And I'm Phil.
And in today's episode, we're talking about the armies of Bulgaria. Continuing in our alphabetized Armies of series, we may break the alphabetization to save the majors for their release dates. Who knows? I guess you'd have to subscribe to find out. But I guess we'll jump straight in, Phil, with Bulgaria, shall we?
Yeah, so if we have a look at what Bulgaria was like in V2, so if we look at the special rules for V2, they had the Axis Allies rule, which was where you could take that additional unit from Germany or Italy.
And if we can pause there before you move on to the next one thing, just the wording of the specific wording is this unit does not count towards the normal platoon maximum. I just want to highlight that in case it changes.
Thank you very much. And the other rule they had was the counter-partisans experts, which were basically meant that against Bulgarians, snipers, observers, and spotters cannot use their special deployment rules and must instead be deployed like the rest of the force. And in addition, enemies couldn't outflank the Bulgarians, but must always come in from their own table edge when arriving from reserve.
Right, so only two, which isn't
Only
a
two.
lot of national characteristics as far as armies go, but not bad ones, because you've got something to bolster your force with Axis support, and then obviously block and outflank can be hugely powerful at times. Yeah. But in V3, what have we got?
We still got two. And we got the same two, but we changed the names. So instead of Axis Allies, we have Axis Support. So a Bulgarian force may include a single unit from either the German or Italian army lists, although no German or Italian army special rules apply. It must be included as part of a platoon. It takes the slot of the equivalent unit type. So, for example, if I take a German sniper in my Bulgarian platoon, then that takes the slot of the Bulgarian sniper option. It may not be one of the platoon's mandatory units. And it may not be a veteran unit, nor a vehicle with a damage value of 10 or higher.
Yeah, and that wording of it takes a slot is what makes this rule far less useful than it was in V2, because it was really useful being able to take, I don't know, an extra howitzer or an extra infantry squad without having to take an extra platoon.
Yeah. An extra tank. You often saw it, didn't you? Two tanks from an armored car when you were playing against Bulgarians or Hungarians or Romanians. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so I think for Bulgaria, this rule is still quite useful because there's a lot of gaps where like they don't have big tanks or they don't have certain weapons available to them without Axis support. And so I don't think it's going to be as big a hit for them. But the reason we've called Axis support now is because we've unified that rule across loads. So when we get to other armies who've got more toys, my problem with this rule is that if it takes up one of your slots, it's a pointless one if you've already got something in that slot that fills the same role. Whereas having an extra slot's fun.
Yeah, and I guess the not being able to take it as a veteran unit, I'm thinking about Pioneers, for example.
Yeah.
Well, I can't take Pioneers because they're a veteran unit, and you don't get regular Pioneers at the moment with the Germans.
That is a real shame, actually. I hadn't even thought of that. But as we get through, yeah, that's one of my talking points about the engineers in Bulgaria, and that's a bit of a shame because that would have been a really nice addition to have one squad of Pioneers.
Yeah, because I could have taken the engineer platoon using the infantry section made into engineers, but as we'll see in a moment, they don't get flamethrowers. Then I add in my pioneer platoon, pioneer section, but I can't because they're veteran.
Yeah.
Anyway,
what about the counter-partisan experts? Are they still experts in counter-partisan activity?
They are, but they are now roving patrols rather than counter-partisans. But it's the same rule. And actually, this is a good rule, to be fair. So when fighting against Bulgarians, enemy snipers, observers, and spotters cannot use their special deployment rules. They must instead be deployed like the rest of the force. And in addition, enemies cannot outflank and must always come in from their own table edge when arriving from reserve. This one, I think, is good, and it could lean into a certain build style for the Bulgarians.
Yeah. That is a great rule. My only problem with it is when we get to the other armies of again, it comes up a lot, and so it's not that exciting. And so when you're weighing up your army choices, you basically, if I would want roving patrols, do I take Bulgaria or do I take an army with the same national characteristics but with more toys? And that's going to be the interesting question as we go through the series. The other thing that's interesting I've just noticed as you read it there is the coming in from your own table edge is V2 wording
Mm,
because now it's all about DZE
yes.
and
Yeah.
DZE is different from table edge.
Yeah.
And so it's actually even more powerful than just saying no outflank, isn't it?
In what sense?
Well, because DZE includes your little sides as well. Because your deployment zone edge is the edge that goes up the side as well.
Okay, so if you're playing quarters now, this opens up a whole question for TOs. Well, and generally just really casual play as well. It's a cut and paste from V2. They
Yeah.
haven't changed the wording in the slightest. So you would expect that it should say DZE. By
Hmm.
saying table edge, there's then a whole question about, well, is in a quarters deployment scenario, is my table edge the long table edge that is opposite you? Or is my table edge in a quarters deployment zone the two edges of the table, which happens to be half the long edge and half the short edge?
Well, I'd say that's two edges, but equally, I think the DZE has added a little bit of like uncertainty into the rules
Yeah.
to an extent. I think that could do with the clarification long term.
Yes.
I would say your table edge is your long table edge.
Yeah.
I imagine that it's probably somewhere in the V3 book where it defines, where it uses the term your table edge as the long edge. But I'm going to find that in the edit. I'm not going to waste your time now.
Yeah, because I mean, all I would say then is there is a potential rules complication between my table ledge
Hmm.
and Raven Patrol saying that my reserves must arrive on my table edge, and in a mission where my reserves can only join from my edges of my DZ, i.e., my
Hmm.
DZE, actually, is my table edge now suddenly half the size it was because it's not the side, it's merely the half of my edge which is in my DZE. And my brain's just gone boom because we're conflating and confusing
Yeah.
V2 and V3 terminology and trying to apply it into a new scenario generating tool.
Well, the thing that's interesting as well is your reserves come on from your DZE. You can't outflank into your opponent's DZE on turn three onwards. You can go up to,
Mm.
which implies that the DZE is that includes the little
Is the
12 inches at the
side,
side if you've got a
yeah,
long table deployment.
or the 24 and a
On
quarters.
quarters, you can come on from your DZE. So
Hmm.
assuming that definition from the outflank thing is both sides, the side and the bottom, your point there about what that means then would mean that actually it could be an advantage for you if you're playing quarters because it's opened up the full width of your back edge.
Hmm.
Because rules is written, I have to come on from my table edge, and it doesn't, which includes the bit that I previously wasn't allowed to come on from. And so actually, this could be a little perk for you if you wanted to whip around the outside on quarters.
Mm. I just wish they used the same terminology throughout.
100%. And I don't think it would have been that much time cost to just quickly swap that out. All it required was sort of a keen eye to notice that that's not the terminology we're using anymore.
Correct.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on.
Move, moving into headquarters. I'm going to say you're welcome to disagree. Nothing exciting, nothing of note, really.
No, no, I'm not going to disagree. It's the three standard ones here: officer, medic, and forward observer.
Nowhere.
Although, okay, so nowhere. Yeah, okay, nowhere. Yep.
Yeah, nowhere. So
Okay.
there's your one thing of note. Now, infantry squads and teams. I did look back at V2 as a comparison,
Hmm.
and as far as I can tell, they haven't lost anything.
Hmm.
They have gained the ability to run engineers, but
Hmm.
not with a flamethrower, just with the engineer rules, so you can have an engineer platoon.
Yeah.
But essentially, you've got an inexperienced squad, a regular squad. There are no veterans on foot. If you want veterans, you have
Yes.
to take horses.
I was just going to spot that. Yeah. So infantry, yeah, you can take inexperienced or regular. You can make them shirkers. You can make them engineers. Some of them can have additional things like Panzerfaust, SMGs, and LMGs. But yeah, if I want to take veteran foot sloggers, I can't. I have to take a mounted section and then dismount them because, to be honest, the cavalry rules for Bulgaria is not great anyway because they can't charge into assault.
Yep, I was going to highlight that as an annoyance that you're paying the same as for cavalry as every other nation, but
Hmm.
you're given one of the biggest disadvantages basically because the benefit of cavalry is you're tough fighters, so you can use them to mop up small squads
Mhm.
or squads you've whittled down.
Mm.
So not being able to charge makes them really quite pointless, other than if you know you're definitely playing objectives, you can whiz around on objectives now, just grabbing
Yes.
one run, grab one run, grab one run, and be an annoyance. But is it worth 2 points a man for that when everyone else is paying? Oh, sorry, it's a 3 points a man.
Three points a man.
Three
Yeah, yeah,
points a man now for that.
yeah,
When everyone else is paying the same 3 points, but can also charge if they need to.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they don't suffer the -1 to come on from reserve, so to reflect what they were used for, in the war, which was essentially was behind the lines kind of anti-partisan patrols and so on. You could hold them back and bring them in to plug a gap, but you're paying, like you said, 3 points for a mounted veteran squad to not get the negative from coming on from reserve. I'm not sure when they're going to get used.
Yeah, and the funny thing was, I thought we were going in the right direction because I think it was the very last FAQ for V2 deleted
Mm,
this rule for cavalry for Hungarians. The Bulgarians were still couldn't charge, but at least the Hungarians were allowed to charge, and so we deleted this nonsense for Hungarians.
mm,
Um, and as I say, if you want to say thematically they didn't charge, don't use them to charge. That's fine by me, but don't make them pay the same points as everyone else. That's
mm.
just it's not cricket, is it?
No, and I'm pretty sure that some of the FAQ amendments towards the end of V2 have not appeared in the V3 PDFs. The V3 PDFs are lifted from the old Armies of books, aren't they?
Yeah, sit
As we
tight for
said,
Armies of Hungary, I guess, to see if it's been
to see
carried
if
through.
yeah, actually that's a good point. Yeah, yeah. Okay, what about team weapons, Johnny?
So I'm a little bit excited here because we are seeing a flamethrower. And
Hmm.
so what that means is my engineer platoon has a point, which when we talked about Belgium, the
Hmm.
engineer platoon didn't really have a function because there was no flamethrower. So you're just taking engineers as extra troops without having to take more rifle platoons.
Yeah.
But even then, why would you not want to take more rifle platoons if you want more rifles? That's fine. Um, and so you've got a flamethrower, and it doesn't have any negative perks. It's a normal cost. Couldn't be happier with a flamethrower team.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can take an MG. I can't take a heavy. I can take a medium. I can take an AT rifle. Upgrade to Panzerschreck. I can take a sniper. Mortars. I can't take heavy mortars, but I can take light and medium and add the spotter if it's a medium mortar. So fairly standard options there.
yeah. It's a shame there's no heavy. Again, like fair enough. It is what it is. Like if they didn't have them, they didn't have them. Um, but it does. It is just one of those small limitations on the army. I
Yeah.
guess artillery next then.
Yeah, artillery, you have one of each. So you have a howitzer, you have an anti-tank gun, and you have an AA gun. So your howitzers, you can upgrade from light to medium to heavy. You can add a gun shield, and you can add spotters. So you've got your full range of artillery howitzers as you see fit there. AT guns, start off with a light. You can upgrade it to the hybrid. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, that
Um,
they've kept that. That was what when we saw these PDFs come out, I had my eye out to see if this made it through.
Yeah. So this is a light AT gun, which can become a light howitzer. You do need to decide which barrel the gun starts the game with when you deploy it, because it's the whole declaring what it is before it shoots. Is that right?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
advance to swap your barrel,
Yeah.
so you do lose a turn of shooting, but obviously you can start with whatever barrel you want. What's really
Yes.
nice now about these hybrid guns actually is previously where you had one and it was tricky to swap between the two, what you can do is you can take your hybrid guns, put them down, and put the barrel on that's appropriate to where you've deployed them. And then if you do manage to destroy the tank, yes, you lose a turn of shooting because you're having to advance them to swap the barrel, but you've then got a light howitzer for the rest of the game. And so
Yeah.
it's not like, those games when you've taken anti-tank guns and you destroy the tank on turn one, and then you're just vaporizing infantrymen basically one
Yeah,
at a
with a
time.
one-inch template. Yeah. True. And obviously, because they're firing as AT guns, they're going to get the +1 to hit on a fire order against vehicles as an AT gun.
Yeah, which is nice, to be
Yeah.
fair.
Anti-aircraft
Oh,
guns, it's
I think actually, sorry, what I've just realized is I said when you advance, you lose a turn shooting. Obviously, you don't actually, it's just -1 to hit, isn't it?
it's just a -1 for moving. Yeah,
But
yeah,
also, you lose your -1 for being a light anti-tank gun because that only counts when you do a fire order, not an advance.
Correct.
So if you do switch from your howitzer to your light anti-tank gun, you're at a -2 immediately, which
Effectively,
in
yes.
a
Yeah.
pinch isn't bad, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry, but you are talking about anti-air guns, I
Yeah,
believe.
just AA guns. It's just a light AA gun on a rotating platform. You can't upgrade it to a heavy. But
I don't feel as bad for interrupting you now
no,
because that wasn't very exciting.
it wasn't. No, to me, it wasn't worthy of writing home. But
Yeah,
it's fine. Yeah, like you've got all three howitzers. You've got an AT gun, which is dual purpose. Okay, so you can't take a medium or a heavy or a super heavy AT gun. Your AA guns for 35 points on a rotating platform, light autocannons are good. Yeah.
yeah. And as I believe we haven't lost anything there in the transition, so that's fine. If you were
No,
playing your Bulgarians previously, so far, I think you've got all the options to play the exact same army, but in V3, pending any changes you want to make now that you can add more stuff in, basically.
yeah, I don't think anyone's lost anything from the armies of books from V2 to V3. They haven't carried over anything they gained from a campaign book or a theatre select already.
Yeah, there's one or two, but not in the minors. I think US lost the rocket launcher, which was a weird thing to just
Oh yeah,
delete.
that's true. Yeah.
Um, and I think there are one or two sort of like quirky omissions that were
Mm,
probably unintentional, would be my guess.
okay.
But the PDFs seem to have been a fairly solid copy and paste.
Yeah.
Someone's really selected everything and pasted it in,
Yeah. Which means for tanks and vehicles, we have three.
which is,
Um,
I mean, three's more than two.
Three is more than two. And yeah, they're perfectly fine. You get your CV-33 tanker, so armor 7, forward-facing hull-mounted medium machine gun. Only 3 shots though, so it's not exactly putting out a load, and it's not dual turret, for example, so you can't split pins or whatever.
You did get a little 5 point saving though. I think he used to be 60 points back in the old V2 days, so not
Fair
bad.
enough. Your Somua, which we'll see when we look at the French list. So 135 points for a regular 8+ light tank, one turret mounted light anti-tank gun with coaxial medium machine gun, and you get the reinforced front armor, which means it's effectively a 9+ on the front.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, again another little perk here because that used to have one man turret.
Okay.
That's the S35, isn't it?
S35 Somua, yeah.
Yeah. So for in V2, same points, same improved armor and everything, but it had one man turret. So one man turret was never enough to make me not want to take a tank, but it's nice not to have it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Hmm.
And then your final one is your Renault R35, so 110 points for an 8+ light tank. This is a one-man turret. It's slow. It is armored all round,
Hmm.
but it's armed with a low velocity light anti-tank gun and a forward-facing hull-mounted medium machine gun.
So that's interesting because that's not in the armies of V2, the R35. There is a picture of the R35 in the V2 Bulgaria section, but he's not actually there in and of himself. And so a nice little addition. I haven't checked the errata to see if he was added there, but oh, um, maybe he was added. Page 68, let me see. Yeah. Also, actually, that R35 was added in the FAQ.
I take it back. Okay, so
So,
there have been some things from the FAQ that have carried through to the PDFs.
so that's interesting. Um, Now the FAQ does say page 68, which is where the S35 was found. It said this entry is incorrect. Use instead the entry for captured R35 on page 24 to 25. So I think in the original armies of, it was errata that they didn't have S35s, they had R35s, and then V3's given them both. A win's a win, as far as I'm concerned.
You do lose though because you don't get the Semaventi 4732, which you did have in the armies of Bulgaria.
Yeah, so you've done a bit of a trade there.
Hmm.
Semaventi, any good?
So the Semaventi 4732, that was back in V2 days, 85 points for a forward-facing hull-mounted light anti-tank gun, 7+. You could add a pin tool. You can make it a command tank. It was vulnerable. It was all right. It effectively is, well, it's just another light anti-tank gun, although
And
it's
cheap
forward-facing.
but cheap and
Hmm.
small
But
was its
cheap and
secret weapon.
small. Yeah, yeah,
And now
yeah.
you could
Okay.
take four of them. It would have actually been a really nice addition, I think, for V3.
Okay, that is it. So that is interesting.
I
There's,
mean, it's
there's actually quite a bit of change going on in the PDF. Yeah.
which is peculiar because I had presumed it was a strong copy and paste, as I said like 3 minutes ago. It's not. It's like a weird copy and paste with like a little bit of an edit, but not a, yeah, peculiar.
Yeah.
Mm. So we've lost our semi-venti. Interesting, no armored cars.
No, but then there weren't any in the armies of originally.
Yeah. Equally, there isn't a huge difference now between armored cars and tanks in terms of using them in your army because they sit in the same slot. And so,
Yeah,
what
I
do
think
you
that
lose or gain by being an armored car versus a tank?
the double pivot, I think, has made a big difference as well. So the fact that you
Mm,
can now pivot twice on an advance, that used to be beneficial because obviously most armor cars were, well, not most, but a lot of them were wheeled. So you had that additional maneuverability over tracked. Now you don't.
yeah. And so it's a shame, but I think you probably do have enough there to deal with like an armored threat plus some infantry threats.
Yeah, I think you'd for me, I'd be looking at the Somua S35 purely because it's the full light AT gun. If I was going to take vehicles, I probably wouldn't, but if I
Mm.
was going to,
I'd be tempted just to take a couple just in case I lose my other anti-tank assets. Obviously, I'm going
yeah,
to run loads of anti-tank rifles because they're my go-to now in V3. But if I was to lose them or they weren't powerful enough to do the job,
yeah,
I would like to have a couple of tanks in the background, I think, if I was playing as Bulgarians.
yeah, it's fair enough.
Yeah,
Just a final note on transports and tows, it's the common vehicles, so it's your cars, your trucks, your light trucks, your normal trucks, that sort of thing. So
yeah.
it's
I I
you
like
have what
that.
you need. Yeah,
Yeah, and I like that as a way to do armies that for our miners, rather than just copy and paste the same truck entry, having it in the main rulebook now is actually fine. I'm more than happy with having the sort of the centralized repository of transports. For this army has bland transports, see the main rulebook.
hmm
That's fine by me.
hmm
And so that's absolutely fine. It's a shame they don't have anything exciting, but equally they haven't lost anything, so that's quite nice.
yeah,
And that's your units.
yeah. There you go.
So you're now aware of every unit that is available to you if you play in Bulgaria. I guess the question though, Phil,
Yeah.
is, and this isn't me asking if you're going to play Bulgaria, because I think the answer to that is no. But if the
Correct.
answer were yes,
Yeah.
or you had to,
Yeah.
how are you building this?
I think this is one of the few times that I would be looking at a gun line, and
Mm,
that's because of the no outflank, no forward deploying, no infiltrator rules, as well as the lack of options. Um,
yeah.
I'm not going to build an armored platoon, given what's available. There isn't units. There aren't infantry units with a bunch of SMGs, so I'm not going to build an assault army with SMGs. I don't have access to armored transports. The generic transports, I think, are pretty much right in saying most of them, if not all of them, are soft skins and so on. So this is the one time that it's completely against my playstyle, but the one time where I would be looking at a gun line because I'm not going to be threatened with the outflank and units getting in behind me. I'm not going to get threatened by a bunch of Soviet scouts forward deploying right in front of me underneath my minimum range for my
Hmm.
indirect firing, howitzers, all that kind of thing. So and because my infantry are not great and I can't charge around assaulting with my cavalry, it's going to be a fairly static line, making use of that Axis special rule. I mean, what would I
But
put
that's the
in
question.
a?
What are you taking as your actual
Yeah,
support? I mean, I've got
uh,
something in mind. If you don't know what to take.
that's probably where I would take an armored vehicle.
Interesting.
Go on, what would you take?
So what I would do, because I was thinking very similar, like my infantry aren't doing anything.
Hmm.
So I'm going to build a couple cavalry squads to run onto objectives if I have to play objectives. Shirkers on my back line, just to hold the back line, my
Yeah, yeah.
objectives, and to protect the guns. And then I
A
thought
lot
that
of AT rifles.
a lot of AT rifles, naturally.
Yeah.
Um, I might take a couple of tanks just for, as anti-tank assets. And but what I was thinking would be a lovely pairing with all those big guns would be a Nebelwerfer.
Hmm. That's the obvious one, and that's
Yeah.
why I was avoiding it because I don't want to be too obvious. But
But yeah,
yeah,
but it fits perfectly with
Hmm.
the big guns and the gun line and playing a very static game and sort of like and also if you take your spotters for your guns, so they're nicely hidden. And then
Yeah.
but if they're hidden, they can recruit your Neville that isn't hidden. It it is sort of like as you say, it's obvious because it is a good idea.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It's just a bit obvious, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting actually. The people who played Bulgaria in V2 have you played them in V3, and if so, where are you leaning? As it's written at the moment, I'm not going to rush out and buy a Bulgarian army, but if I had one, that would be how I'd play it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there might be something there from like a thematic play and even semi-competitive of taking a tank or something cool. I think taking infantry because you can only take one, they're going to be very unsupported, so I'm not going to go that route per se. Um, and so there might be something there with a panzer maybe. I mean the other thing as well in terms of your infantry not being very good anymore is now that Panzerfaust, you can have one Panzerfaust, but it's 15 points, which
Mhm.
makes it just an absurd cost for that regular squad with a Panzerfaust to use as a defensive Faust against tanks. Is it's very expensive. It's a very expensive way to defend yourself against tanks, which is
Yeah,
why perhaps you can justify a more expensive German tank
yeah,
because you're saving on your Fausts.
yeah. Maybe the Panzer III with the medium AT gun, because that's a nice price
Mm,
point. That one, isn't it? It's
yeah.
150 something, roughly, I think.
I mean, uh, on the obvious route, but less obvious, because now your slots are being used up,
Hmm.
you might want your four heavy howitzers. And so, where you can take your Nebelwerfer without using up the Nebelwerfer slot would be to take one of the Nebel vehicles, so a Panzerwerfer
Panzerwerfer, yeah, or the Stukafuss.
or
Could you?
a baby Renault. I'm not sure if he's
Yeah,
in the big rulebook actually.
yeah. I'm not sure either. Not sure the
But yeah, one of
Stukafuss.
those two basically. 90 points. I think it's 92 or 96 for an inexperienced Panzerwerfer. That's not a bad way to add
Mm,
a
hmm.
fifth artillery piece without losing a heavy howitzer.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. But
Mm,
yeah, if people are playing Bulgarian V3, let us know. I'm genuinely interested to hear how you're doing it. Or is that army sat on the shelf?
yeah, especially with the Axis support. I'd love to know what you've taken as your Axis support and how that compares to V2, because I think that's probably the one place in the whole Bulgarian army that will have changed the most compared to V2. Yeah. But overall, what are your thoughts on Bulgaria? Competitive, not competitive, somewhere in between?
Somewhere in between. I think there are more competitive minor nations, which we will see as we continue through the series. Um, there are definitely less competitive minor nations, so they're not at the bottom, but they're fine. They're okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. They're sort of they have enough toys to not automatically lose, but not enough toys and rules to be a real danger to someone who's playing with one of the big armies.
Yeah.
I am a bit sad because they're a bit it is a bit bland. Like there isn't I don't know what there isn't a particular niche there other than, as you say, take a few howitzers, have fun shooting people at range. There are other armies that do that as well. And so that's not a selling point of Bulgaria uniquely for me. Um,
And I know from, we had Alan, didn't we, on
mhm.
the V2 episode. One of the reasons that Alan leant towards the Bulgarians in V2 of was it the only one that prevented outflank, or certainly like one of maybe
I
one or
think
two
so.
armies that prevented outflank. But as you said, other armies do that now as well. So the kind of the USP of the Bulgarians from V2 is no longer a USP, coupled with perfectly adequate but not groundbreaking unit choices.
Yeah, because as you said, because they don't have a USP anymore, all it takes is for someone who has the same selling point but with more features,
Mm,
and suddenly you're asking why am I playing Bulgarians?
yeah.
Because even if I'm running Bulgarian like models because I like them, there's nothing really to stop me saying that they're another minor nation that has the exact same rules And like, but I'm just using those rules because they're slightly better, basically. Um,
Well,
which,
the only thing that would stop you is if you were like, no, these are Bulgarians, and therefore I'm running them as Bulgarians. But yeah,
yeah. Well, equally in this sort of transition period where we're just sort of like messing around with PDFs rather than big books, I think if you did it and you took a rogue tank, not cool. But I think if you took someone else's national characteristics and said, I think these fit Bulgarians better, and I'm going to use my Bulgarian models with them, and all of the units were accurate, I think that's a fair shout if you're not inspired by this particular PDF.
so there we go. So Bulgaria, the second in our armies on parade updates. Let us know what you think.
Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.